I love Qatar Airways, but they have a problem. It's a problem I pointed out partly back in 2019 in my viral video about their constant equipment swaps. Yet the cause of this issue has only gotten worse since then. If you fly QSuite on an A350-1000 from Doha to London, your experience should be fantastic. But on roughly 3/4 of Qatar Airways flights, your experience will be nowhere near that. Let me give you an example. If you're flying from Doha to Paris, you will likely get a QSuite with a mattress pad, caviar service, and a jetway on departure in Doha. Meanwhile, if you're flying to anywhere in Germany or most other cities in Europe, you are unlikely to get QSuite, and if you don't, you won't get a mattress pad. You also won't get caviar on almost any flights and are very likely to have to take a 10 to 20 minute bus ride to your aircraft. The same difference in experience applies to Singapore versus Bangkok, New York versus Chicago, Sydney versus Auckland. In all cases, the latter gets an inferior experience despite the routes having plenty of competition. So join me, Dan, a full-time airline reviewer who has flown over 160 airlines in the past decade, as I explain the problem with Qatar Airways business class and what Qatar Airways should do about it, in my humble opinion. Today, I'm flying to the Maldives to make a point. Just kidding, I'm actually going to celebrate a very special occasion. I decided to go to the Maldives today on one of my favorite airlines, Qatar Airways. Except today, it's no normal Qatar Airways flight. You know what? Let's not diddle daddle. Let's hop on board. Probably my 100th bus gate here at Doha Airport. This probably doesn't look like the Qatar Airways you're used to. However, I've flown this aircraft before, and odds are if you've flown to the Maldives, Zurich, Istanbul, Bangkok, or Hong Kong in the past few years, you have too. The truth is though, you will never see the airline advertising this specific cabin. It's kind of funny and sad to think about how obsessed I was with Qatar back in 2018 and 19. I wanted nothing else but to fly with them at all times. In a way, that was a much simpler time for the airline and things looked very different back then. You see, Qatar Airways shook the aviation industry back in 2017 when they unveiled the groundbreaking QSuite. Truly first in business class, as they were calling it. I flew it for the first time the following year and was blown away. I remember being so excited knowing more and more aircraft would gradually be getting these seats, replacing the older non-direct aisle-access business class seats in their fleet. Not only were they reconfiguring their old 777s with QSuite, but they were taking delivery of lots of A350s with these seats as well. Crazier yet, their previous infamous CEO Akbar al-Bakr said they'd be retiring those same 777s just a few years later. Qatar Airways needed to have the most modern, state-of-the-art fleet possible. The 777 wouldn't cut it. However, in the background, there was some chatter at the airline and in the industry. Qatar Airways was already having problems with its QSuite. The seat, it turned out, was too heavy. It also didn't fit on narrower aircraft like the 787, an aircraft they were expecting a significant number of in the coming years. What happened next was unfortunate. I don't know if you heard about it. Yeah, that sucked big time. Of course, one of the industries most impacted was the travel industry. Qatar Airways was one of just a few airlines to keep operating a decent network of long-haul flights, doing the vital work of getting people home. Good deeds result in good PR, so what's not to love? Like many airlines, Qatar Airways took this chance to retire or at least permanently ground most of its oldies. This included the A330, the beloved A380, and perhaps most notably, their non-QSuite 777s. The A350 was the way forward, and luckily, Qatar Airways had a lot of them. Except, one day in November 2020, an A350 registered Alpha 7 Alpha Lima Lima was sent to Ireland to receive a special paint job. At that point, cracks were found under the paintwork, potentially exposing the lightning strike protectant material below. Was this due to grounding the aircraft in harsh desert conditions, even for a short while? Or was this more of a wider issue with the A350? Just like me, Akbar al-Bakr is a detail-oriented customer with high expectations. So he set out to get to the bottom of this, inspecting dozens of A350s across the fleet. To his dismay, they discovered that the paint was peeling in an abnormal fashion on the majority of their aircraft. Out of an abundance of caution, emphasis on abundance, Qatar Airways ever so slowly started grounding A350s. Did any other airline follow as you might have expected them to? No, not a single one. But it's not a problem, right? The world is still in a pandemic and international travel is way down. The airline doesn't need all these
these aircraft. True, that's probably partly what Abu Bakr was thinking at the start. Little could anyone have expected these aircraft to be grounded for over 2 years in some cases. This might still all have been manageable except for one small teeny tiny commitment made by the state of Qatar a few years prior. Just as the world was coming out of the pandemic in the fall of 2022, Qatar was hoping to make a massive PR splash around the world by hosting the World Cup. This naturally meant welcoming the world to Qatar. You see, the only thing is, the airlines of the world don't really fly to Qatar. That is Qatar Airways' job, and it's a little difficult to do when most of your fleet is grounded. So, in 2021, the airline started coming up with a backup plan. Keep in mind that the 777X, which was supposed to have started being delivered at this point, was nowhere in sight, further worsening the fleet situation as its delay has done at so many airlines.
We're just about to take off, and before I continue my Qatar Airways story, how about we check what's in store for us food-wise on today's flight?
After all, Qatar Airways is one of just a few airlines that offers Dine on Demand, the most costly, labor-intensive, and luxurious business class service setup possible. You can eat whatever you want, whenever you want, at least in theory.
Qatar Airways really does not disappoint when it comes to soft product, and they never have.
As you can tell, I'm flying solo today, which means I have the always fun challenge of trying to record and get good angles of myself without anyone's help.
Over the years, I've discovered ways to get shots that are much more interesting even when I'm alone, like panning shots without actually using my hands. How do I do that? Through the magic of today's video sponsor's signature camera, the Insta360 X4. This little 360 camera allows you to record once, think later.
I just click record and don't worry about what the camera is facing because the real magic happens in editing afterwards. There, I can adjust the angle and movement of the camera however I want, capturing the most insane angles all in one recording. I mean, just look at the variety of angles and shots and different variations of one take that I can get. I could play around in the Insta360 app all day. Here, you can also change your video between horizontal and vertical, making it perfect for different platforms. You might want to make it horizontal for YouTube and then vertical for Instagram, for example. Insta360 also incorporates AI here to get cool shots without really needing to do any editing at all.
There's no way to get such diverse video in 8K resolution, may I add, than with the Insta360 X4. So I'm heading to the Maldives, where drones are usually forbidden, right? Check out what happens when I put my Insta360 X4 on the invisible 3-meter selfie stick. Who needs a drone when you can get this POV on the same camera I was just talking into on the plane? Also, I just have to point out, this is allowed where drones are not allowed, and it's much more quiet than a drone. It makes no noise at all, so it's a win-win. You can also bring it into any country, unlike drones that are not allowed everywhere. As you can tell, it even supports external Bluetooth microphones. It's also waterproof and extremely rugged, meaning you can take it pretty much anywhere. So start upping your video game with one of my favorite cameras in the entire world by scanning the QR code right here, right now, or by clicking the link at the top of the description below. And by the way, it makes a pretty sweet Christmas present too.
So, with most of their fleet grounded and the World Cup approaching, what could Qatar Airways do? Really only one thing. Airports all over the world were covered in aircraft that no one needed, except Qatar Airways. Naturally, they started with the most logical thing, ungrounding their own aircraft. That included bringing back the 777s without QSuite, aircraft they hadn't officially retired, mind you. Then they brought back the A330s, slightly worse news since they were far older, but that was sort of overshadowed by the great news that everyone's favorite A380 would be making a temporary return, much to their CEO's despair as a vocal A380 critic. Suddenly, the fleet consistency that Qatar Airways was achieving, thanks to its unusually small fleet, was waning. Not only that, but somehow through the pandemic, the Q-Suite had stopped being produced. Not that the airline had time to take its precious aircraft out of service again for retrofitting. Instead, they were receiving a small number of 787-9s with an entirely different seat, their so-called business suite. Okay, nice. New aircraft with a good but not quite Q-Suite level seat? This is at least a positive development. Unfortunately, the situation with Airbus was only getting worse. They felt that Qatar Airways was damaging damaging their reputation and attempting an opportunistic money grab. It went so far that Airbus eventually cancelled all Qatar Airways outstanding orders, something that was almost unthinkable. The plot thickens, much to Qatar Airways' dismay. Now they can't just unground their A350s because that will suggest they were bluffing all along to try to get money out of Airbus. They had to keep committing to their message of the A350 being faulty, except the World Cup was quickly approaching.
So what did they do? They brought in aircraft like the one I am on today. This is a 777-300ER, a Qatar Airways staple, except this aircraft used to belong to Cathay Pacific.
The exciting news is that this aircraft has a first-class cabin at the front, almost doubling Qatar Airways' tiny first-class footprint, which is otherwise only available on the A380. This business-class seat is a so-called reverse herringbone, so the layout is similar to what you'll find on their 787-8s, certain A350s, and even their A380. Around that time, they turned to the used aircraft of two additional airlines, Oman Air's old A330s and Virgin Australia's 777s, since they had stopped flying long haul entirely. Now that's about to change, but that's the story for another day. This meant that Qatar Airways added new aircraft from 3 other airlines with entirely different cabins on each. Perhaps they thought this was just a temporary measure, so they chose not to reconfigure them, but I'm not sure I'd consider 3 years and counting temporary. Qatar Airways has relied on other airlines' aircraft for a long time. Before COVID, they flew LATAM A350s with the LATAM cabin and livery. The problem is that now they have ended up with the most varied fleet of any airline in the world, with no immediate plans to address that due to decisions they made in the early years of the pandemic. Let's take a look at their current fleet. They have 2 versions of their standard 2-2 recliners on the A320 family. They also have a different type of recliner on the 737 MAX. They have lie-flat seats on certain other A320s, the same seat type they have on certain A330s. Then they have the Oman Air A330s in addition to that. Next, they have the A350s with 2 different seat types, QSuite and the older reverse herringbones. The latter are also available on 787-8s. The 787-9 has a different seat again, actually 2 variations of the business suite with an upgraded one on newer versions. Then we have the messiest fleet of all, the 777s. Some of these have QSuite, some are like the ones I'm on today, and some are slightly different ex-Virgin Australia seats. Then we have a significant number of aircraft that are still in the old 222 configuration without direct aisle access. That is 12 different business class seats, including 10 that are entirely different from one another. That means a passenger leaves one aircraft and is way more likely than not to step into an entirely different cabin on their connecting flight. As I see it, this is a problem. As much as I love the Qatar Airways experience and have done so for a long time, I believe this is something that can't be overlooked. If United, one of the world's biggest and definitely not most premium airlines, can offer the same exact business class seat on every international wide body in its fleet, so should Qatar Airways. As I say again and again, they have some of the best, most hard-working cabin crew in the world. This flight I'm on included. I can't tell you how many times I've heard them get unfairly treated or even yelled at because of an equipment swap that they have nothing to do with.
The irony is that QSuite is not perfect. In fact, this bed might be one of the most, if not the most comfortable bed in Qatar Airways fleet. With each seat, you definitely win some and you lose some. Alright, it is food time. I love that Qatar Airways gives you a little Tabasco if you want it. This looks good.
It's now been 2 years since the World Cup, and what progress has Qatar Airways made in terms of its fleet? None, unfortunately. And that part isn't really the airline's fault, because all airlines are struggling with getting new aircraft delivered. However, instead of making consistency a priority, which is the most important element of a premium product in my opinion, understandably, they're focusing on moving attention away from that, trying to appear flashy based on what I'm seeing. How does that manifest itself? Them mentioning they have the world's best business class and are the world's best airline everywhere they can. Earlier in 2024, they made a massive deal of introducing caviar in business class as the ultimate proof that they are the best in the world. That's great, but almost half a year later, less than 10% of their routes offer it.
They'll argue that what they care about is the soft product, and that is why people fly them. That argument stands with airlines like Emirates and Singapore Airlines that don't really invest in the most cutting-edge seats. But you can't go around introducing the world's best business class seat, using it massively in your marketing all over the world, and then claiming that the seat you get doesn't matter. So I really do love the Qatar Airways business class experience. I believe it is one of the best in the world, but it's just so frustrating and kind of upsetting how they so blatantly prioritize a small number of routes and aircraft over all the others. So we've started our approach into Mala, and luckily since the flight was so empty, I managed to move from row 26 to row 16 for landing. I like being back there so I don't disturb people, and today was completely empty back there so I could talk as much as I wanted to. Here there's a bit more people, but this gives me a much better view outside, sitting in front of the wing, because the approach into the Maldives is genuinely one of the most breathtaking, amazing approaches in the world. So I'm gonna put on some, I don't know, emotional music and just sit and look out and be like, ah. So we made it to the Maldives, and I just want to say I hope this feedback is heard, and I hope it's not taken as anything other than well-meaning feedback. It's a message from a frustrated fan and customer who feels like it's more important to offer a consistent, high-quality business class experience across the board rather than the world's best to a select few. I can't speak for their current CEO, Badr Al-Mir, who seems like a nice guy, but one thing I know for sure, and that is that if Akbar Al-Bakr was not the former CEO of Qatar Airways and he was just a customer of theirs, I am confident that he would be the first to call out this issue inconsistency and demand it be remedied. So it is vacation time. We made it. Woo! Thanks again for tuning into this video, and thanks for supporting my videos as always, even when they have to be on the more critical side. I want to also remind you to check out the incredible Insta360 X4 to get the most unique angles possible from a camera. If you want to see what this shot looks like not from this camera, check this out.
My next video and the last of the year will be another Qatar Airways video, but very different and very feel good. I didn't intend to upload 2 Qatar Airways videos in a row, but this is kind of just how the year ended. I also want to remind you about my huge 15th anniversary giveaway, which ends today, so don't forget to register for that at the QR code right now. For a few more days, you can also purchase a variety of amenity kits from my website, all from flights I have taken, with the money going into the Nonstop Dan Flight Fund to help people in need. On that note, I cannot wait to see you all for that very special video, which I am sure you'll enjoy. But until then, as always, fly safe.